icy grip. Lone wolves are back. Fatal Fury 3! Road to the final victory.
The year is 1995, 3 years after the events of the previous King of Fighters tournament, where Terry Bogard defeated Wolfgang Krauser von Stroheim, a German count who had organised the tournament in order to face Terry, the killer of his half-brother Geese Howard, in the hopes that by defeating him he could make his claim as the strongest in the world. Following Terry's victory over Krauser, the Count was unable to accept his first ever loss and soon took his own life, crippling the influential Stroheim family and leaving his estate abandoned. Upon returning to his home of Southtown a 2-time KOF champion, Terry's legend among the locals grew exponentially, with him soon becoming known as the legendary Hungry Wolf. Since then, Terry has spent the last 3 years travelling around the world, meeting new opponents and honing his fighting abilities, having continued to gain a passion for fighting after his 2 KOF wins. One day, however, Terry receives an invitation from his old friend Richard Mayer, who's opening a new version of his famous Pow Pow Cafe, dubbed the Pow Pow Cafe 2, and wants Terry and his friends to celebrate its grand opening in Southtown, prompting Terry to put his globe-travelling adventures on hold and return home. Terry anticipates his return to Southtown, looking forward to meeting up with his younger brother Andy Bogard, as well as his friends Joe Higashi, Hua Jai and Mai Shiranui, who are all returning to Southtown to also celebrate the Pow Pow Cafe 2's grand opening. After he returns to Southtown, Terry is met by Joe, who tells him of a disturbing rumour he has heard from Cheng Sinzan, who has begun to hear rumblings across the criminal world that Geese Howard is actually alive, and is currently seeking a way to avenge his defeat against Terry 4 years ago. In addition to the rumours of Geese's survival, Cheng has also informed Joe of a legend revolving around the mysterious Jin scrolls, 3 ancient scrolls that, when gathered together, are rumoured to bestow the owner with immortality. According to Cheng, Geese already had one of the scrolls in his possession prior to the King of Fighters tournament that took place 4 years ago, and used it to recover from his fall from Geese Tower, with the scroll allowing the user to speed up their recovery rate. Unfortunately for the heroes of Southtown, however, Cheng's rumours are true, as Geese Howard is indeed alive and ready to make his first move in 4 years. Geese had only survived his fall from the tower thanks to his timely choice of releasing the key energy he had gathered in his palms onto the ground upon impact, with the recoil of his energy offsetting the shock of the fall, though still injuring himself and putting him out of commission. While recovering, Geese managed to obtain another Jin scroll which he took from the Krauser estate after the Count's death with the help of his loyal bodyguard Billy Khan, with Billy's allegiance to Geese's half-brother in the previous tournament having been a ruse to keep Geese's survival a secret until he was ready to make his move. With Geese now in possession of 2 of the 3 Jin scrolls, he now only needs the last one in order to gain immortality and truly rule Southtown unopposed. In order to find out who currently holds the last Jin scroll, however, Geese allows word to spread across the world that 2 of the scrolls are in Southtown, prompting those who know of their existence to make their way there, including the one who holds the final scroll. Though Terry doubts Cheng's credibility, knowing him to be a conman and a swindler, he nonetheless takes the rumours of Geese's survival and the Jin scroll seriously, planning to journey out into Southtown alone in order to track down and defeat his sworn rival and recover the Jin scrolls before they fall into the wrong hands. Though he still intends to investigate the rumours himself, Terry tells Andy that neither of them should get involved as a way to convince his younger brother to not get roped into another of Geese's plots, with Terry feeling that he should be the one to stop Geese for good. However, Andy feels a disturbing sense of evil lurking in Southtown and decides to ignore Terry's advice in order to investigate the city and find its source. Andy, however, chooses to not tell Mai about this feeling as the two's relationship has become somewhat strained due to the recent passing of her grandfather Hanzo Shiranui, as well as Andy taking over as a teacher at their dojo, with several of the female students now flirting with Andy on a near daily basis, the act of which makes Mai incredibly jealous. Despite this, Mai becomes aware of the Jin scrolls' existence after inadvertently hearing about them from Joe, and decides to also search across the city in order to find out what Andy and the others have gotten themselves roped into this time. Once word of the location of the Jin scrolls is spread around the world, multiple fighters begin to descend on Southtown in search of them. One such fighter is Mary Ryan, known professionally as Blue Mary, a freelance investigator who has come to Southtown after being hired by an unknown third party to investigate the Jin Scrolls. Though she hides her pain well, Blue Mary's life has been one marred with tragedy, her misfortune beginning when her grandfather was murdered by none other than a young Geese Howard, who killed Mary's grandfather after he was confronted about his evil ways when Geese had tried to be his student. Later in life, Mary's lover Butch and her father were both killed by terrorists while working in the Secret Service protecting the president. Mary was so devastated by their deaths that it is rumoured by many that she has never smiled since that day. With nowhere else to go in life, Mary used the fighting skills taught to her by her grandfather and Butch to become an investigator, with her nickname of Blue Mary being named after her lover's favourite drink in his honour. Another fighter that has entered the city in search of the Jin Scrolls is Sokaku Mochizuki, who is a skilled member of a clan of Buddhist monks who since ancient times have worked tirelessly to hunt and destroy Asura, powerful demigods from Buddhist legend, while also allowing themselves to be controlled by dark entities. Mochizuki aims to see the Jin Scrolls destroyed, believing that they are the source of an Asura and will be a threat to the world if left unchecked. While in Southtown, Mochizuki also keeps an eye out for any users of the Shirinui ninjutsu style, with the two clans having a deep and intense rivalry that has lasted for centuries. Amidst all the fighters that make their way to Southtown in search of the Jin Scrolls, one man in particular sparks a large amount of chaos throughout the city, Ryuji Yamazaki. Having grown up in Japan as a listless orphan, Yamazaki's life was changed when he was taken in by a local Yakuza boss who hired him to be his bodyguard, with Yamazaki growing to see him as a surrogate father. However, Yamazaki's failure to protect his boss led to his murder at the hands of a rival gang, the shock of which broke Yamazaki's mind, creating an insane alter ego that seemingly possesses him on a whim. After killing his boss's rival and avenging his death, Yamazaki fled to Hong Kong and soon became a major figure in its criminal underworld, soon becoming known internationally as a powerful and influential broker, weapons dealer, and drugs trader. After joining up with the Chinese mafia, Yamazaki is hired to travel to Southtown alongside a mysterious employer who orders him to obtain the two Jin Scrolls in the city that are in Geese's possession, with the employer somehow knowing about both his survival and the fact that he currently holds them. With his orders clear, Yamazaki begins his rampage on Southtown, directly taking Geese's forces head-on as well as anyone else who gets in his way. Yamazaki eventually tracks down the location of the Jin Scroll that was recovered from the Krauser estate and brutally beats Geese's henchmen, Ripper and Hopper, taking the second Jin Scroll from them in the process. With Yamazaki's violent war across Southtown in search of Geese and his other Jin Scroll putting even more eyes on the city, several more fighters get involved in the ongoing Southtown chaos as a result of Yamazaki's involvement. Following Yamazaki from Hong Kong is Hon Fu, a plucky detective infamous for always chasing after criminals to various degrees of success. Hon Fu currently finds himself investigating a drug ring that plagues China and is desperate to solve the case and shut the whole criminal operation down. Having narrowed down Yamazaki as one of the drug ring's biggest ringleaders, Hon Fu journeys to Southtown after hearing of Yamazaki's actions in the city, hoping to finally defeat and arrest his home country's biggest criminal. Once an undefeated super heavyweight kickboxing champion, Franco Bash retired from his profession in order to raise his family, now spending his days working as a mechanic at the Southtown airport in order to support them. However, Franco is forced out of retirement when Yamazaki kidnaps his young son, leveraging his life in order to motivate Bash to follow Yamazaki's orders to the letter. Left with no other choice, a reluctant Franco serves as Yamazaki's right-hand man, doing his dirty work across Southtown in search of the Jin Scroll in the hopes that when finished, Yamazaki will release his son back to him. On the night of the Pow Pow Cafe 2's grand opening, Richard Mayer is devastated when his new club is torn apart by Yamazaki, who arrives in search of the Jin Scroll and leaves the club a ruined mess. One of the witnesses to Yamazaki's destruction is Bob Wilson, a talented capoeira fighter and the protege of Richard who scouted the young man after seeing his passion for capoeira, saving him from a life of poverty by taking him back to Southtown to train him. After helping hone his skills even further, Richard hired Bob to help work at the Pow Pow Cafe 2 as a secondary manager, but the two were completely unprepared for Yamazaki's rampage and could do nothing to stop him. While Richard stays behind to oversee the cafe's reconstruction, Bob decides to journey across Southtown with the goal of tracking Yamazaki down and punishing him for the destruction of his master's newest establishment. As Southtown descends into chaos amidst the citywide hunt for the Jin Scrolls, many of the key players involved in the search begin clashing against each other. While searching across the city, Terry runs into Blue Mary, with the two initially being unsure of the other's true intentions. Not willing to trust the other, the two fight, and upon Terry's victory, they both realise that they have more in common than they thought and agree to team up together in order to solve whatever evil is currently plaguing the city. After the two split up and search the city for more clues, Mary runs into Franco Bash and confronts him about his allegiance to Yamazaki, aware that Bash both knows and works for the criminal. The two then fight, with Franco managing to defeat Blue Mary, but he spares her life and flees back to Yamazaki in order to tell him that an agent is looking for him. Yamazaki shows no interest in facing Blue Mary, however, and instead flees into the city as a livid Franco tries desperately to make Yamazaki give him back his son, but to no avail. Terry makes his way to Eastside Park, where he manages to run into Yamazaki himself at the Southtown Aquarium. Yamazaki challenges Terry to a fight and the two clash, but Yamazaki ends the fight early to escape, remarking at how much of a treat it was to fight the legendary Hungry Wolf. Terry is unable to prevent Yamazaki from getting away, but is shocked when he recalls that Yamazaki mentioned the Jin scrolls before fleeing, with Terry finally realising that Joe and Cheng's stories about the legendary scrolls were not lies as he had initially believed, but are indeed real and in Southtown. Terry is suddenly ambushed by Mai as she accuses him of holding on to the Jin scrolls, having heard that their current holder is in the aquarium. After briefly clashing with Mai and proving his innocence, Terry is taken to meet Andy, who's angry at his brother for getting involved in the hunt for the Jin scrolls, with Terry having been the one that said that the two should stay out of it. The two brothers then engage each other in a fight, with Terry coming away as the winner. After Terry mistakenly accuses Andy of telling Mai about the scrolls, the two brothers put their petty squabble aside and continue their search across the city before it descends into further chaos. Terry's search across Southtown eventually takes him to what appears to be the abandoned Geese Tower, the site of his last bout with Geese Howard in the first KOF tournament. Upon reaching the roof of the tower, however, Terry is met by none other than Geese himself, along with his loyal bodyguard Billy, who vowed to make him pay for sending him plummeting from Geese Tower 4 years ago. Despite Billy's desperation to fight him, Geese decides to take on Terry himself this time and clashes with his sworn rival in a rematch 4 years in the making. During their fight, however, the garden terrace on the tower's roof somehow manages to set alight, forcing Terry and Geese to battle amidst a raging inferno. Terry is able to once again defeat Geese, who admits that he underestimated the legendary Wolf, claiming him to be stronger than both Jeff Bogard and Wolfgang Krauser, though Geese still calls Terry a small fry in his plans. Terry is unable to apprehend Geese as he is lost inside the growing flames, with the top of Geese Tower now almost completely engulfed in fire. Despite this, Terry still tries desperately to chase after Geese, but is suddenly met by Cheng Xinzan, who arrives in Southtown to rescue Terry via helicopter. Cheng tells Terry that it's no use trying to chase after Geese as he has no doubt already escaped with Billy. Instead, Cheng tells Terry to come with him and confront Yamazaki, who's close to delivering the Jin scrolls to his employer, making them one step closer to immortality. Terry reluctantly leaves Geese to go with Cheng, who takes Terry to South Station where they find Yamazaki standing over a defeated Hon Fu, who had tried to arrest Yamazaki but instead received a brutal beating. Terry tells Cheng to get Hon Fu to a hospital while he takes on Yamazaki, who eagerly awaits his rematch with the legendary Hungry Wolf. The two then clash for a second time, with Terry once again coming away as the victor. Terry tells the defeated Yamazaki to get out of Southtown while he still can, being more interested in keeping the peace within the city than dealing with the Jin scrolls. Before he passes out, however, Yamazaki tells Terry to head to Delta Park if he's bold enough to find out the truth behind the scrolls. Terry suddenly hears a disembodied voice that tells him how pleased he is to finally meet him after hearing so much about his legacy within Southtown. Terry then finds himself transported to Delta Park where he meets a young man by the name of Jin Chonshu, Yamazaki's employer and the holder of the third Jin scroll. Chonshu warns Terry that Yamazaki was weak compared to him and demands that he hand over the last scroll for him to collect, with him now being within reach of immortality and control of the world after waiting 2,200 years. With Terry not having the scroll on him, he chooses to engage Chonshu in a fight in their secret hideout. Though Chonshu is able to wield incredible mystic powers during the fight, he is still no match for Terry, who manages to defeat the young Jin, knocking him out cold in the process. Suddenly, another man stands over Chonshu's body, distressed at the sight of who he calls his little brother. The man, Jin Chonrei, Chonshu's older twin brother, becomes incensed at Terry for beating the younger Jin and vows to not let him leave their hideout alive. Terry is then left with no other choice but to take on the much stronger Chonrei, whose power provides even Terry with a challenge. However, Terry is still able to defeat the elder Jin brother, who tries to use one last desperate spell before collapsing to the ground unconscious. As the Jin brothers eventually wake up, they begin to act differently and ultimately reveal the truth to Terry. Orphaned at a young age, Jin Chonrei and Jin Chonshu were one day possessed by their 2,200-year-old ancestors. Their ancestors, Jin Konglong and Jin Kuryu, used their descendants' bodies to collect their family's ancient Jin scrolls, hoping to resurrect themselves into immortal bodies and conquer the world, a goal that they didn't know was actually impossible to achieve. With Terry having inadvertently freed the Jin brothers from their possession, the delusions of the ancestral Jins has been rid from the world, and Chonrei and Chonshu are now able to live their lives in peace. However, to the horror of all three, someone has managed to sneak into the hideout and steal the Jin scrolls the brothers had collected while Terry fought them. This thief is none other than Geese Howard, who now stands at the top of Southtown with all three legendary Jin scrolls in his possession, the power of immortality at his fingertips, and an unopposed Southtown finally within his grasp. To celebrate his victory, Geese orders Billy, Ripper and Hopper to gather the forces of the Howard connection and let them have some fun in Southtown, with the crime lord knowing that no one in the world can stop them now. With the Jin scrolls and immortality now in the possession of the one man who deserves them the least, the fighters who had scoured Southtown try and return to their normal lives, despite knowing that Geese Howard, sooner or later, will make his move. Joe decides to stick around in Southtown where he meets with Lily Khan, the overprotected younger sister of Billy. Having become smitten with the young lady, Joe offers to take Lily out on a date which she considers accepting, to the fury of Billy who desperately plans to keep Joe away from his sister. Honfu manages to return from his trip to hospital in time to organise the arrest of the still unconscious Yamazaki, who is tied up and thrown into a police van before he has a chance to fight back. Honfu then celebrates with his girlfriend Brenda, though he cockily laments the feeling of emptiness he has as a result of his major victory. With Yamazaki now in police custody, Franco Bash makes his way to South Station where he finds his kidnapped son Franco Jr. in a train car and rescues him. Overjoyed to have his son back, Franco begins making plans for his comeback to kickboxing, having been motivated to as a result of his time spent working as Yamazaki's underling. Bob Wilson returns to Richard Mayer, who has managed to rebuild the Pow Pow Cafe 2 since Yamazaki destroyed it. To celebrate, Richard invites as many people from previous KOF tournaments as he can while putting Bob in charge, feeling that he has proven himself enough to be the full-time manager of the Pow Pow Cafe 2. Having mended their relationship during the hunt for the scrolls, Andy and Mai make their way back to Japan in order to continue their training, knowing that they will eventually have to return to save Southtown from Geese's immortal grip. Upon returning to Japan, Andy discovers during his training that he was injured more severely than he thought he was during his last fight in Southtown, forcing him to put both his training and date with Mai on hold. After being told of the connection behind the Jin scrolls and the Jin brothers by Terry, Blue Mary angrily confronts the agency that hired her for the job, asking them why they never told her about the existence of Chonrei and Chonshu. When the agency refuses to tell Mary why they never told her about both the Jins and who the employer for the job was, Mary quits and leaves the agency behind, having grown to believe that the mystery employer was none other than her grandfather's killer, Geese Howard. A defeated Terry returns to the streets of Southtown, unable to forgive himself for letting Geese get his hands on all three Jin scrolls and move one step closer to immortality and complete control of Southtown. Suddenly, Terry is met by a young boy named Rock who shows interest in the legendary Hungry Wolf. Terry decides to let go of his sadness and tries to strike up a bond with the boy, hoping that the two can become friends. Unbeknownst to Terry, however, is that the boy he has met and befriended is none other than Rock Howard, the son of Terry's sworn enemy, Geese.
We await your return, warrior.